Hello and welcome back to Crit and Crit. I'm Sint,
I'm Axion.
and we are continuing our discussion of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus while we play through Castlevania Circle of the Moon. Has Dracula or whatever vampire we're fighting ever, as a plot point, kidnapped another Belmont as motivation to get you to show up or something?
Not another Belmont, but other characters, yes.
Don't you hate when characters do that? Like, take your grudge out on the person you have the grudge with and don't drag innocent bystanders in.
I do believe that's actually well, not the exact line, but a paraphrase of what Alucard says to him in Symphony of the Night, which is basically, stop torturing random people over your beef with the Belmonts.
I thought he said, a miserable pile of secrets, but enough talk have at you.
That's the conversation with Victor in the opening cutscene, not when Alucard, who's the main playable character, meets him at the end of the game.
Okay, how many times do I have to say I have not played Castlevania?
That's why I'm telling you! I know you don't know this, so I'm explaining why that's not the case.
Well, in that case, this topic for the video is a lot more apropos of a Castlevania game than I thought when we wrote it down. So, in Frankenstein, the creature decides the best way to get Daddy's attention is to kill the people close to him. Just to get a reaction out of Victor, because, well, it's not like anything else has worked with human contact. And yeah, it's not exactly unique to Victor, or not to Victor, to the creature or to Dracula. This is a thing that happens over and over and over and over.
I was about to say, this is a thing that real people do.
I was still restricting it to fiction, but okay, if you want to go there.
Well, I mean, fiction reflects reality.
True. So, shall I go to the place that I'm pretty sure we're both thinking of?
Go ahead. Get it over with.
The fridge.
Go ahead.
Okay, so, in Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner comes back home to find that his girlfriend has been murdered and shoved in the fridge. This is a common enough thing. A female love interest exists only to be murdered to gain sympathy for a male character, that it's its own trope, and Gail Simone, I believe, has a website called Women in Refrigerators.
Yep.
As a protest against it. So, yeah, this is not unique storytelling. It's incredibly cliched and hackneyed storytelling, and Frankenstein gets a pass on it for doing it before most of the other storytelling, but it's kind of the Seinfeld effect right now. Stop it, it's no longer cool. This does not mean turn around and have the female character discover this with a male character. Let the characters have a character in their own right. They don't have to just be plot devices. But it also kind of usually works to show how evil the evil person is who's doing it. But in Frankenstein, we're meant to sympathize with the creature, who, at least in the case of William, it's ambiguous as to whether or not he actually meant to kill him, or if he just panicked and accidentally strangled him because William was making noises. And
also, the creature doesn't 100% understand his own strength because he's 2, or well, 3 at this point. No, this would be when he was 2, because he was 1 while he was with the DeLacy's.
The point is, he's a 7-foot-tall toddler.
Yeah.
And we know he didn't intend for, Justine's death to cause direct harm to Victor. He was just like, I can make a random person take the fall for me, that works. And didn't know that Justine was actually a close friend of the family. So, but when it comes to Clerval and Elizabeth, it was absolutely, I am directly and deliberately doing this to people that I know are close to you and will cause you the most pain possible, so you can know the pain I feel every day. So, and opinions are usually really split as to whether or not the creature is justified in this. Because you can absolutely understand his desperation from born of loneliness and melancholy. But, on the other hand, how do I put this? There's a Brooklyn Nine-Nine meme that we can put up here. Cool story, still murder. You know?
Yep. I'm not super familiar with Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but yeah, cool story, still murder.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to see it, but I know of the I Want It That Way opening, which is still the best thing.
Oh, boss room already. Not going here yet. So, you end up with this situation where it's not quite the same thing as fridging, but there's definitely connections that can be made. So where are you going with this?
Mostly just commenting on the phenomenon and that it happens multiple times in the span of the same book.
Fair point.
Because, like, you have mentioned this quite a bit in reference to, does this make the monster a monster? Because, well, he is still killing people, even though he has an incredibly sympathetic reason for doing so. It's like, I can feel terrible for you, but that doesn't change the fact that this happened. Like,
it doesn't make you right. It doesn't make you justified, and it doesn't make you the one that's not in the wrong. You're just... There can be two bad guys. Better. And that's kind of the thing, is there does not have to just be one bad guy and one good guy. There can be two villains. We
can have an entire room full of assholes. We often do. And you're dead again.
Yeah. This is the second to last section of the game, and it hurts.
I can tell from how many lives have we lost now?
Twice in this episode.
Rip.
But that's why I hit the save point when I got warped back here. Wrong way. So... it basically comes down to that... well, whether or not the creature is justified depends on whether or not you are willing to say/allow violence against an innocent party for the sake of a justified revenge. And that's kind of the thing that breaks it for me, is that for all that I can feel bad for how the creature has been treated and what he's had to go through, that beef is with Victor. And choosing to solve that not by dealing with Victor directly, but by harming others for the sake who aren't in any way involved other than being tangentially connected to Victor himself, for the purposes of making Victor upset. It's bad enough that his solution to the problem is cause more pain.
Again, he's a toddler. This is how toddlers tend to act.
I'm aware. I'm just giving my 2 cents on the matter.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's just like, come on, why don't we talk this out? Because he's 2. He doesn't understand other options. He hasn't been taught other options. Because it's almost like he's never been parented, Victor.
And that is admittedly, why a big part of this is Victor's fault.
What do you mean a big part?
Because the monster the creature does still bear some blame.
Okay, fair. But still, like, this entire thing happened because of Victor.
I agree.
Everything in it can be traced back to him.
The way I'd put it is, the creature is still, to some level, responsible for its own actions and the harm it has caused.
Yeah, this though leads to the discussion of, if a child commits a crime, is the parent also to be held liable?
And that's what I was going to say, is Victor is also responsible for the creature's crimes. Because he had the ability and, moreover, the responsibility, given his position within the creature's creation, to do what a responsible parent should do to avoid this exact situation. And he did not.
Yep.
If he had tried and it had failed, then that would be a different situation. If it was more like movie Frankenstein, where Frankenstein creates the monster, tries to interact with it, and the monster breaks loose and causes mayhem, and it's not anything directly of Victor's lack of ability to instruct, that would be a different situation, but that's not how it is in the book. In the book, Victor gets spooked by the creature and bolts, and then, well, goes catatonic for a year. But he more or less just acts like, oh, it's gone. It was just a nightmare. It's not my problem anymore. Ooh, I got a card.
Yep. Which kind of brings us to closing thoughts, really. Because, well, let's look at Victor and the Creation's closing thoughts, which are largely, who has learned a lesson and what did they actually learn?
Oh, that's the poison web. That one sucks.
So, Victor, from the moment we actually meet him, is urging Walton away from giving in entirely to scientific ambition. Stay in the embrace of blessed ignorance, be happy, go home, don't turn out like I did. Which says that Victor has only learned ambition is bad, and has not actually learned what he should have, which is, ambition is fine.
Have some self-control.
If you handle it responsibly and are willing to face up to your mistakes. Like, he clearly shouldn't have gone as far as he did. He should have, worked with people, like, Walton is doing by having a crew that he has to work with. So, Walton is already doing better than Victor by virtue of having a project that he cannot do by himself. He has already cut himself off from the go mad from the isolation in your own head that Victor fell prey to because he's an obsessive personality who knew this about himself and yet made sure that no one who could rein him in could rein him in. The Creation could have turned out just fine if Victor hadn't abandoned him. Like, I'm sure people would have freaked out at first, but do you honestly think the university wouldn't have jumped at the chance to show off what one of their students did?
Look what our prize student did! Yeah, it's ugly as heck, but it's amazing!
Yeah, and look, he'd be taken care of, and people would probably gradually come to care for him. So, yeah, the Creation would have turned out better in that regard, too, more than likely.
Because you know what's the best thing to combat being afraid of something?
Profiting off of it.
Well, that probably wouldn't hurt, but I was going to say, being exposed to it and learning that you can be in its proximity and it doesn't harm you. It's just a thing or a person or whatever, and you've been around it long enough that you have the direct evidence of your own experiences to say, oh, I was around that thing or that person or that entity for hours and nothing bad happened. I guess everything's gonna be okay.
Yep. But no, he just rails about knowledge did this to me, knowledge ruined my life. No, using the knowledge improperly ruined your life. Like, knowing that the chemicals under my sink can be mixed to make a deadly gas is not ruining my life. Knowing that and then doing it and breathing it in like an idiot would ruin my life. Knowledge sometimes is very necessary to not hurt yourself and ruin lives. But this is some nuance that's a little too hard for Victor to grasp because, you know, he'd have to stop being a narcissist for 5 minutes.
And be willing to accept that, hey, sometimes it's okay to accept fault, because that means you can fix what you screwed up.
Yep.
But
And then there's the creature. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but Victor can't do that. He can't be willing to accept that he did anything wrong, because that would be embarrassing.
Yep. And, you know, this is what people mean when they call someone, like, apocalyptically selfish. I will doom many people so I don't have to inconvenience or embarrass myself. Victor cannot own up to his actions and racks up one hell of a body count. Because everyone the monster killed, their blood is on Victor's hands.
Yep. Which was my point earlier, is that the creature is responsible for his own actions, especially after the point at which it's clear that he has learned enough of humans and of human life that he is capable of killing people and what that means. And
Yep.
but Victor is responsible for everything he does up to and beyond that point, because Victor had the potential and the responsibility to prevent that and did not.
Yep, and this leads us to the creature's lesson, which is, I don't belong. I never had any hope of belonging because even my creator rejected me. The only thing I can do now is kill myself. Because when he sees Victor's corpse, it's not joy. He didn't want Victor to die. He wanted Victor to love him, to accept him, to acknowledge him. And instead, it's just, now he has nothing left to live for. He's smart enough to recognize Victor's hypocrisy in that, like, okay, so when I kill somebody, it's murder, but when you try to kill me, it's not? Am I not alive? Do I not count?
Oh right, this is the arena, I don't want to be here.
Rip. And yeah, because he has, like, he knows he has nothing else to live for, so he's gonna go, you know, to the very peak of the North, to the very center of the North Pole, and light his funeral pyre, and burn himself to death, to make sure that he'll be gone. And isn't that a commentary on your parenting style when that's the final lesson that your child learns?
It's certainly a statement.
Yeah, and I think it's why Frankenstein endures so much, because for all of the many flaws of our deuteragonists, there is a very powerful, visceral story that resonates with everybody, and that is simply the need for acceptance. Even the most introverted amongst us has at least one close connection to humanity. And without that, it's really, really hard to go on. That's why rejection hurts so much. We are, by our nature, social creatures. So we need to have that acceptance, that common feeling of humanity, even in small bursts, just to stay human. And the further and further you insulate yourself from that, the more questionable your decision-making becomes. Look at Victor. Look at the creature. They show us this lesson very well, but it's a shame that Victor was never able to learn this. Because had he learned it, much of the novel could have been avoided. But hindsight, as they say, is 20/20.
Yep.
And this is why Frankenstein remains one of my favorite books.
It has certainly been an experience, I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
No exit this way.
But yeah. Any closing thoughts from you, Axiom?
Frankenstein did not have the immense effect on me that I think it had on you, but it certainly tells a tale. And obviously we've spent, like, what? A little over a dozen episodes on...
I think this is 15.
Something like that, yeah. There's so much here. It's an incredibly dense story, an incredibly meaningful work that has a lot of content to it. And I think that's, as you said, one of the big reasons that it endures the way it does, is because there is so much to be taken from the story, so much to be experienced, so much to be considered, so many different ways, so many different subjects, so many different concepts that can be touched on with this one story. And, of course, there's the entire field of literature that it established, and everything that we have thanks to having Frankenstein that we might not have or might not have in the same form if it weren't for Frankenstein. And I think for that reason alone, its value really cannot be overestimated.
Yeah. Like, I think it has this place it does for me because I first read it in high school, so that impressionable age. And you go in, as we mentioned, first episode, with these pre-established notions of what Frankenstein is, and the book is nothing like it. It's mind-blowing just how different it is to what you've always been told to expect. And it's so full of emotion and feeling that you can't help but pity, especially the creature. And I get to see that reaction every year when I teach this to my sophomores, and they always get into it because I think the emotion is so raw and sincere. And this is a bunch of kids who, like, will struggle with some archaic language, but they can get through Frankenstein just fine because that feeling is there, and that core need for my life has nothing in it, but I can't bring myself to give up my life. Because that feels like a teenager in many, many ways.
And I think that sincerity is a big reason for the story's value on top of everything we've already said. Because, especially now, in the age of irony, people call the 90s the age of irony. It's got nothing on the early days of the internet in the aughts, and to some degree even the teens.
Yeah, we have irony, but with Dadaism in the form of memes. Of course it's going to get compounded.
But the point being, we now exist in this world. As I've put it multiple times in the past, we exist in a post-parody reality, post-satire reality, where things are happening that, if you suggested them even a few years ago, people would have thought inherently, oh, that's so extreme that it has to be a joke. And it's like, no, it's not a joke anymore. This is 100% serious. And I think there's a part of our culture that's still adjusting to that. And a part of that seems to be a developing backlash against the culture of satire and irony, and a developing greater respect for sincerity. And I think in some ways that kind of plays into what you were saying last episode about romanticism. There's that appreciation there for the truth of feelings and of the real emotions no longer being hidden by a safety mask of insincerity and sarcasm, where people are starting to become more and more comfortable with being their true selves in the open and not having to conceal their real opinions so much. And there's obviously some downsides with that, of certain people being more comfortable in saying the worst things out loud. But for many people, it's a chance to be their authentic self in the open without fear of being seen as bad for being sincere. And for an honest opinion about things to no longer come across as seen as childish.
And that's where we go back to one of my favorite quotes. C.S. Lewis. When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the need to be so very grown up.
And I think that's a pretty good place to leave this one.
Yeah.
We'll be back to Castlevania probably around Halloween-ish time with a different story. But next time, at long last, and with many requests, we're returning to Discworld. See you then.
Bye.